At long last, an article has been published that acknowledges the fears of the fans and the criticisms of the fans that Galadriel is a manufactured hero and that it doesn't work in the series, even though she is the main character. She doesn't really fit in the plot, she doesn't really fit in the lore, and I'm going to get into that later. But it is essentially the first article that I have seen personally that criticizes this character in any way. So let's go into it. So it starts with leading into the Rings of Power. Fans were adamant that they wanted a series that directly connects to J.R.R. Tolkien's source material, and the showrunners assured them that it did. Even still, there were spats over Galadriel's warlike character, Lisa's missing beard, and two Durins being alive at once. So, what fans have been criticizing since the beginning. Some of those issues were put to bed, like they added a bit of hair on Diesel's cheeks in post-production. But for hardcore fans, there was always a feeling that things weren't going to add up. Um, by and large, critics liked Rings of Power, but it's harder to get a read on where fans stand, considering Amazon had to halt the Rings of Power reviews due to combat review bombing and also review praising, but they don't mention that at all. Um, so one of the most blatant ways that happened was with the character of Galadriel, so changes in the series. In The Lord of the Rings, Galadriel was elegant and a powerful presence. She had lived for untold thousands of years, and had the wisdom that she had garnered through the ages made itself known. In The Rings of Power, Galadriel was totally different. She was stubborn, grim, and bellicose. While that may seem like a contradiction of Galadriel's character, it actually isn't. In the Second Age, Galadriel was much younger, and the still fresh tribulations of the First Age weighed on her. With that in mind, Galadriel's dark character wasn't a departure from the source material. However, portraying her as an unquestioned hero is a problem. The main problem, as I've said before in videos with this series, is that they have access to basically nothing. They have 147 pages of appendices, and the bits they can get out of The Hobbit and The Lord of the Rings. That's it, nothing more. They have no Silmarillion, no unfinished tales, no histories of Middle Earth. They can't use the First Age novels like The Children of Húrin, The Fall of Gondolin, and all those books. They can't use anything of it. Um, that is the main issue. So what they say that Galadriel is a much younger character in the Second Age, it is true. But also the still fresh tribulations of the First Age weighed on her. That is not true because this series is set at the end of the Second Age. So those First Age tribulations were already 3,000 years in the past, even longer. I don't know exactly when the date is in the Second Age that the series started, but well, it isn't clear. Nothing is really clear where things are, where things happen. We don't get nice overviews of maps, and um, except for the fact that they walked from Eregion to the west gate of Moria, then we got a nice map, but for the rest it's really difficult to locate yourself in time and in space. So this is a problem with the series, so they don't have the source material to work with. And it is true, I mean, that in the peoples of Middle Earth, Galadriel, her maiden name, or the maiden name given to her by her mother, was Nerwan, which means man maiden, due to her height and her strength. In the 1973 letter to Catherine Findlay, Tolkien writes that Galadriel, her name is basically maiden crowned with gleaming hair, so that her hair is golden with touches of silver in it, because of her lineage, and that she was of Amazon disposition and bound up her hair as a crown while taking part in athletic feats. And this is referring to her far youth, he says. So um, it is not unlikely that he means years of the trees. So when she was actually young. Does this mean that she couldn't fight? No, because in the Unfinished Tales, Tolkien also states that she fought with the Teleri against the Noldor during the first kinslaying at Alqualonde when Feanor tried to take the ships of the Teleri to sail to Middle Earth. And in the Silmarillion, she isn't mentioned in the first kinslaying, but she is also part of the host of Fingolfin who travels over the Helcaraxe to Middle Earth. And there they get assailed by orcs in Lamoth. So it is possible that she also fought in that battle, that it was all hands on deck because they were, surprised and suddenly attacked by an army of orcs that they didn't expect to be there. So also she's from a noble house, so it isn't unlikely that she knew how to fight, that she knew, for example, fencing techniques, and that she knew martial arts. That isn't unlikely at all, but that is the years of the trees and maybe the beginning of the first stage, because after that she dwells in Doriath for 500 years. She goes to Nargothrond, where her brother Finrod established a kingdom. So she dwells there sometimes. In the Second Age, she is actually a ruler. She rules under Gil-galad in Lindon, later establishes an elven realm in Eriador with Celeborn, and then later goes to Eregion to rule over a fiefdom together with Celebrimbor. And it is there and then she eventually thwarts or tries to thwart Sauron's attempt to sway Celebrimbor, which he eventually manages to do because he basically turns the population of Eregion against her, and she has to leave during a revolt. So thwarting may mean in this case that she used her mind powers to try and stop the influence on the people of Eregion. The difficulty again is that we don't know what Galadriel was doing during her time as a ruler. So it is entirely possible that she remained in London, that she remained in Eriador, that she remained in Eregion before going to through Khazad-dûm to Lothlorien, um, because she had a responsibility to her people, so she couldn't go off and wander or take 5 elves who can't fight to fight snow trolls and all that. Um, so in the Second Age, Galadriel was already much wiser than she had been in the Years of the Trees. She also had her, realms to rule, basically why she left Middle Earth. But all these stories, Amazon can't do anything with it because they don't have the rights to it. So they basically fabricated the Galadriel based on the snippets that Tolkien provides in the Unfinished Tales because it suited them, and not because she is a Galadriel from the Second Age. So, back to the article. I diverged a bit too much. Um, the Rings of Power showed Galadriel on a mission to hunt down Sauron, and even when her company was ready to go home, she wanted to press on. Later, when Gil-galad declared peace in Middle-earth, Galadriel still wanted to fight, and Galadriel ended up denying the call of the Valar so that she could continue the search for the Dark Lord. Again and again, she refused to listen to the naysayers around her and followed her own path so that she could fight the good fight. And I've mentioned it in my review. In the first episode, she basically endangers her entire company because she wants to press on in a snowstorm, which isn't really smart. She basically doesn't want to stop even when one of her soldiers is almost freezing to death, and she only goes back to him because she's yelled at. And then she angrily steps up to him. um, she endangers her people. um, she is arrogant, she's brash. She's nothing like you would expect from a ruler in the Second Age because she isn't. They basically use the argument of she's thousands of years younger than in the Third Age to basically force Years of the Trees Galadriel um, and maybe beginning of the First Age Galadriel into the story, and it doesn't fit because people who have read the Silmarillion notice that she was ruling. She wasn't on dangerous missions and secret secret Sauron bunkers to explore. She wasn't doing any of that, so far as we know, because Tolkien doesn't describe it, but you can assume that um, she didn't go off on these secret missions, or thwarting the will of the High King Gilgalad, um, because she had people she was responsible for. Uh, so that is basically Galadriel in the Second Age, and this is not, and it doesn't feel right. And when people say that it has nothing to do with um, people who don't want to see a strong female character, or people who are sexist, but it's because it doesn't feel right, because people actually know the lore behind it. But because Amazon uses the appendices, they basically can do whatever they want with Galadriel, because she is barely mentioned in it. She is mentioned 3 or 4 times, I think. So that isn't much, even for 147 pages. So yeah, they did a really great job in choosing a part of Lord of the Rings where they basically can do anything they want, um, and they don't care. CBR also says that this makes up for a good story. It is not exactly what happened in Lord of the Rings. In Tolkien's material, elves weren't all heroic, true. Most of them were holier than thou figures who believed themselves superior to other beings. In fact, that's why many of them chose to stay in Middle Earth after the First Age, so that they could be superior to men rather than inferior to the Ainur. And also, you have people like like I'm blanking out on the name, but there are people who basically betray their countrymen. There's one elf who betrays Gondolin. There's Feanor, who basically slaughters the Teleri, steals their ship. He leaves even his own kin behind in Middle Earth, um, having them to cross the Helcaraxe. He is really prideful. He's arrogant as well. He's basically Galadriel in the series. Um, he thinks he's always right. He goes off with a small vanguard pursuing orcs and then gets killed. Wow, surprise! So no, not all the elves were like these heroes or these good characters. So portraying Galadriel as one who is always right is ridiculous. Um, so, in Galadriel's case, Tolkien actually contradicted himself. In one version, Galadriel wasn't forgiven at the end of the First Age. The second story said that Galadriel refused her pardon so that she could stay in Middle Earth and rule over the kingdom of elves. In that version, she came to Middle Earth searching for power in the first place. Thus, Galadriel refusing Call of the Valar so that she could be a sacrificial servant was pretty inaccurate, and it wouldn't make sense if you. It is nothing um, like that at all in the books. I mean, people can choose when they go to the west. Like the elves who go to the west, who Frodo encounters in the Lord of the Rings, in the Fellowship of the Ring when he leaves the Shire, Gildor. They are basically, already, dwelling around in that region and preparing to go to the west. So people can choose when they go. Um, at the end of the Third Age, there are still elves. Celeborn is still in Middle Earth, even after Galadriel has left. Legolas is still there. Some of the woodland realm elves are probably there as well. So um, it's not clear when the lost elves, really depart, but um, it's likely that Círdan was also with them. So the lost elf, um, who also always ferried over the other elves, was one of the last to go back to Valinor, which would make sense. But Galadriel refusing the call of the Valar, it is inaccurate because it wasn't really a call. Um, for the Noldor, they were forgiven, um, and Galadriel refused this call in one version, as it said before, and in another version, she isn't just forgiven. So it is really difficult to work with this material, with the unfinished tales, with the histories, because it is often contradicting. It's different stories, it's different characteristics. Tolkien was working on this epic his whole life, so a lot of things have changed. And if you take the canon, it's The Hobbit and The Lord of the Rings, and some people even argue if the Silmarillion should be considered canon because there are later versions of some characters that aren't in the Silmarillion. So it's basically Christopher Tolkien who assembled the story to be a coherent narrative. Um, to me, it belongs in the canon, but there are some people who argue that it's not because it was also published after Tolkien's death. So it's really difficult to work with this material, but Amazon doesn't have the rights to any of it, so it's even more difficult for them, but they don't care. Um, so the problem is that the Second Age doesn't really have any overarching heroes until Gil-galad and Elendil fought Sauron in the Last Alliance. So Amazon decided to manufacture a hero in Galadriel. The thing is, that could have been done without making her seem overly and unquestioningly heroic. So, after all, the elves weren't always heroes and left Valinor on pretty bad terms. So, the Rings of Power needs to be careful of painting Galadriel in too heroic of a light, or fans will be further displeased with the departure from Tolkien's materials. It isn't all the elves who left Valinor, it's only the Noldor who left Valinor on bad terms because they basically slaughtered the Teleri. So, yeah, we don't get to see that as well in the sort of prologue to the Rings of Power, where with Galadriel's narration. So we see the elves going to war, but not the Noldor. So that is already a departure from Tolkien's material, because there were still elves in Middle Earth at that point. Elves who never even went to Valinor, elves who were born at Grievinen, and then during the long trip to the west, some groups branched off and stayed in Middle Earth. So it's the Noldor who leave Valinor, and they leave on pretty bad terms. Not all the elves. So um, anyway, that's it for this video. Let me know what you think about it. I know it's uh, quite a bit of information about Galadriel, but I think it is necessary to see how difficult this material is, and how difficult it is to go through the histories and the Silmarillion and the unfinished tales to see that there are contradictions, and there are really vague passages around surrounding these characters, and there's changes to names, and there's changes to the stories, to their actions, to their intentions. Um, it's all very difficult to work with, and as I've said several times in this video and before, Amazon doesn't have the rights to any of it. They use the appendices because they have more leeway to do what they want. They can add more characters that aren't in the Silmarillion or in the Lord of the Rings, because there aren't many side characters mentioned in the appendices. It's mostly the main characters of the Second Age who are mentioned. So basically, Amazon, I mean, they they played it dumb and smart. They played it dumb because they paid $250 million for The Hobbit and The Lord of the Rings, and can't basically use anything of it. So they can't use anything of the Third Age. Um, so yeah, they got in a pickle there by using only the appendices. So smart, yes, but it's maybe not intentional. Maybe they thought they could buy off the rights for the Third Age from Warner, and then they would be in the clear to, remake Lord of the Rings. Um, but yeah, anyway, let me know what you think in the comments below, and see you in the next one.